the topic of whether whiskey, as we see it, is kosher or is not kosher, is unusual kashrus discussion, because we are so used to having food with hashgacha. We're so used to having food that we know it's kosher because it's either amazingly innocuous, like bottled water, or because it has hashgacha on it. So we've been lulled into a very easy life as far as knowing when the food is kosher. But in whiskey, for whatever reason, that's not the way the market is set up. The food does not have hashgacha on it. As a rule, most whiskeys do not have hashgacha on it. And so we have to look at whether it's kosher from a very different perspective, which, surprisingly, well, it shouldn't be surprising, was the way people judged foods 100 years ago. Okay, 100 years ago, and from before that, forever before that, you judge foods. The Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, and Kuf Yudalad, and Kuf Yutes, there's all kinds of rules. You can eat this food, you can eat this food, based on assumptions of how you make food, and certain rules, and rois, and all kinds of rules that are the way the Torah tells you whether you can decide if you could eat something or not. So we're going to use those traditional ways of looking at how you eat food, whether food is kosher or not, to decide whether it's kosher or not. Okay, there are quite a number of issues as to whether whiskey, as we know it, is kosher. I'm going to only limit myself to the three main issues that there are. Okay, there are other smaller issues that are more involved and more complicated, but the three main issues are going to be, first of all, whether there's stam yayin, or maybe some other things that are like that the actual beverage is made out of them. So we'd be concerned that it's not made out of a kosher raw material, it's made out of a non-kosher raw material. The second question is, naniach that the raw material is kosher, we'll talk about the process of aging. Does aging maybe make blias of non-kosher come into it, or things related to the questions of aging, does that bring a non-kosher blia of stam yayin into the food? And the third question we're going to talk about is, at the very end of the process, they potentially add all kinds of things, flavors and blenders into the liquid, into the beverage. So are they at that point making a treif, not because of the inherent beverage, not because of the aging, but because they're adding something in right before bottling? They're adding something in to do something affect the taste. Maybe that should make the food not kosher.
You're saying whiskey. You're talking about whiskeys in general, not in a specific kind.
Right. Are you using the word whiskey generically to mean all high alcoholic content beverages? All those kinds of things are called. I'm calling whiskey. Okay. Okay. So let's start with the first question. In order to understand what our child, if you just look at the chart just for a second, and we'll refer back to it here and there. Okay, whiskey starts off with the first part of making a whiskey is you have to have sugar. Okay, you have to have what they call a mash of sugar and water. Okay, that's the box here called box number 5. You have to have a mash of sugar and water. Then there's all kinds of ways to get your sugar, or what we would call more professionally called glucose. You have to have sugar and water. How are you going to get that? The most common way to get it is the first box, which is starches. The starch is broken down into its sugars, and that gives you your sugar. Or you take it from a fruit. Fruits have sugars naturally in them. Or milk has sugar in it. Well, lactose is a milk sugar. And there's other ways to get sugar, literally like cane sugar. Okay, in the first 4 boxes, the words in parentheses are what the final product is if you start with that. Meaning, if you start with cane sugar, the finished product is called rum. That's what rum is. And if you start with corn, then by and large, the finished product is called bourbon. That's not an exact definition, but basically, bourbon comes from corn, or at least 50% corn. It doesn't have to be pure corn. But something, basically, corn leads to bourbon. Okay, so you have to get, the goal here is to get to box number 5. You have to have sugar. And then when you have your mash of sugar, you ferment it into alcohol. Once you have your fermented alcohol, you would concentrate that alcohol. The alcohol content will only be like 12%. At that point, it stops fermenting. Okay, the yeast can't function above that level, so you have to concentrate it to 40, 50, 60%, whatever you're going to make it. And now you have a whiskey. Okay, now we're at box number 9. You have a whiskey then. That whiskey, you age. In most cases, you age it. You blend it potentially. We'll talk about that later. And then you bottle it. Off to the side, you saw that you could stop the wine once it's a wine, which is at 12%, and call it wine. Or you could take the whiskey and concentrate it further. If you concentrate the whiskey further, we'd be at box number 10. You get what we call ethanol, or just GNS stands for grain neutral spirits, which could become vodka, which could become gin. That's those things are on the side. They don't get aged. Those are very the word low class. There's a different kind of a thing. It doesn't get aged. You just concentrate it so far, then you dilute it with water, and you got yourself your vodka. Okay, and then you buy. Okay, so when we're talking about whether the product, the first question, which is the raw material possibly not kosher? Is the thing you make the wine out of the whiskey out of not kosher? So we're talking primarily about the first top 4 boxes on the top. Really, we're talking about the second and the third one. Is it made out of grapes, which will be wine and will be potentially stam yayin, or is it made out of milk? And we'll talk about how that could come to us. Okay. So the shaila is, I pick up a bottle of some kind of a whiskey. Do I have to be concerned that the raw material is wine or is milk? Now, some of them, much to people's surprise, some of them, it says it right on the bottle. Okay? In many things, legally, it has to say it. So there are vodka has to say where it comes from. Legally, it has to say where it comes from. Now, where it comes from could just be grain-neutral spirits. But some of them will say that they come from wine, that they come from milk. It'll say right on the bottle that it comes from, which is illegally it's supposed to. So some of them, it's very obvious that they come from stam yayin. Okay? Or some of them, like cognac. Cognac is wine that was concentrated further to the point that it becomes whiskey. Okay, cognac is when you do that from a specific place. Or brandy is any wine that's concentrated to 40-50%. That's what brandy is. When you're saying you're drinking brandy, a true brandy, then you're drinking stuff that was concentrated, wine that was concentrated to a percentage that would be the kind of thing you drink for a whiskey. So if you're drinking brandy and you listen to Kashrus, of course it's stam yayin. That's obvious. It's right there on the bottle. It says brandy on it. I say that La Fouquet, fruit brandy. If you make brandy out of peaches, okay, you call that a peach brandy. Then that's not. Then the starting material, at least theoretically, is the fruit, not wine. Okay. But now let's talk about. So we have just a plain thing. It doesn't say on the bottle. It doesn't say on the bottle that it's made out of stam yayin. There are times that it will say that. We have just a plain old bottle. You pick up a bottle of Tennessee whiskey. Do I have to be concerned that this thing is made out of stam yayin or milk, or I don't have to be concerned? That's our first question. So there's a Gemara like this. This is not in your hands. Okay? The Mishnah says like this. The Mishnah is hamurayis, which is a fish oil, and green is based on Nike. That's something else, not Vigetas. Hamurayis, I'm skipping. So Asurun v'Isurun Isana. Meir says that also to eat, and the also bahana. Why? Rashi says because the way you make this fish oil is you put in wine into it. And the Gemara is going to say later, we'll see in a second, that they put it in to take away the sharp taste of the fish oil. So it's also bahana, because stam yayin was surely in the times of the Mishnah, stam yayin was also bahana. This is not in the that's what stam yayin is also bahana. So this fish oil is also bahana. And chomer me'ein isun israna, they are not asubana. Even though it has the wine in it, it's not asubana. Okay, we'll see why in a second. So that's what the Gemara says. So you have this fish oil that typically has wine in it, and the thing is you don't have to. It's a machloek, so it is or not asubana. It's for sure asubachila because it has stam yayin in it, but it might be. If you could turn them to the first page of the Kingdom, the number 1. The Gemara there on the bottom says like this. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to copy another page. I'll do that. The Gemara, I forgot to copy on the page. The Gemara on Lamed Testament page, which is what this page number 1 is going on, it says like this. One of the things that are asur b'achila and mutar b'hana, okay, as Mishnah before, which is kushin, she'ein darkan l'aseh b'kachon yayin. These are pickled foods that you don't usually put wine into. So the Mishnah says pickled food that you don't usually make wine out of them, those things are asur b'achila, but not asur b'hana. Okay? So they're asur b'achila because they may have wine in them, but they're not asur b'hana. Okay, so the Gemara wants to say like this. The Gemara says here on the bottom of the first page, ukushin shedarkan l'aseh b'kachon yayin. So the Amar Chizkiya, lo shanu el shedarkan. It's only mutar b'hana if it's a case where it's usual to put wine into it. It's common to do that. If you know that they put wine into it, not just that it's likely. Rashi says if it's right that they're going to put wine into it, then it's even asur b'hana. Why? Because it has stam yayin into it, and stam yayin surely was was asur b'hana. So if it's asur b'hana, so you can't eat the food is also asur b'hana. It's like the Gemara, how is it different than murayis, the fish oil that the Chacham says mutar b'hana? How come the Chacham say fish oil is mutar b'hana even though it usually has wine in it? And how come? And here in the case of the kushin, the pickled foods, it's mutar. So the Gemara says like this: Chasam lavure suama. In the case of the fish oil, the wine is only put in lavure suama to take away some bad part of the taste, and therefore the Chacham say that it's mutar b'hana because it's, the way I understand it. you're not getting a hana from it. The wine that you're drinking, this food, is making the food, taking away a bad taste. It's not giving you something positive, and therefore it's not asur b'hana. But hachal suki taima, here, by the case of the Kashrus, why do you pickle your foods? You pickle the food because you want it to taste good. You don't want it to rot. Okay, so it gives up oil. I shouldn't say this. It gives a positive flavor into the food, and therefore it is considered a hana, and you're not allowed to. It's asur b'hana also. You can tell that. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan says, no, afilu b'yadu anami with it. Even if you know that the Kashrus have wine in them, you're still allowed to have enough from them. So how is it different from a mayor who asks about it? A mayor says you're not allowed to eat it, the fish oil, if it has wine in it, you're not allowed to eat that. The Gemara says no, it's different. The Rashbam says what it means like this: when you eat the fish oil, you eat the wine also. The wine is mixed into the oil. You're eating that wine with it also. So that's why it's asur b'hana. But in the case of the pickled foods, you don't eat the juice. You only eat the vegetable. You don't eat the juice that's pickling in it. So there, since you don't really eat the stam yayin. The stam yayin is the wine or the vinegar that's pickling it. So therefore, he holds it's not asur b'hana. Okay, so let me summarize what the Gemara just said. Okay, the din is like Whisky. Okay, the din is like Whisky. That says like this: if you have a food where it's likely that it has stam yayin mixed into it. Okay, so if it's a case of the fish oil, where the fish oil is with the stam yayin is just to take away the bad taste. Okay, just then it's mutar b'hana. It's asur b'achila mutar b'hana. In the case where it's the mesuki taima, it's to give positive, good taste into your food. Then the din is the food is asur b'achila and asur b'hana. Okay, and the din is like Whisky. That's the din is like Whisky. Okay, so when you read this Gemara, what would you say? The Gemara said two cases. There's a case where you usually put there's Kashrus that you doubt them to put wine into it, and that you know that there's oil into it. So now, you know that there's wine into it. So now I tell you, if you go out into the street and you find a product, you find Kashrus, you find pickles. Okay, that's mamash the case too. You find pickles, and it's in the industry. It's reasonably common that you put in wine into those things. You pickle it with wine vinegar. You're allowed to eat it, or you're not allowed to eat it. What would you say? Should you be allowed to eat it, or should you not be allowed to eat it? Okay, the Gemara is just talking about pickled foods. So Whisky and Rabbi Yochanan argue what happens if you know that there's wine in it. Then it's for sure asur b'achila, maybe asur b'hana. What happens if it's common to do it, but you don't know for sure if they do it or not? So what's the din? So the din is, if it's common, the din is that you're not allowed to eat it. Okay, it's asur b'achila, and it's mutar b'hana. So now, but is there a case that it's mutar b'achila? Is there such a thing as a case where where this thing is mutar b'achila? Where Kashrus, you go into the street and the pickled foods that you commonly use wine in those foods. It's a normal way to do it. You use wine that you're allowed to eat the food. Is there such a case? So the simple reading of the words is okay. The word doesn't say there's any case that's mutar. There's a case that it's common. People do it. Not right of the times. Some of the times they do it. And if right of the times they do it, then it's asur b'achila. So also, so now it's if it's all the time, if it's for sure, then it's asur b'hana. If it's not for sure, then it's asur b'achila. But asur b'achila should be all the time. Okay. So if you read this Gemara plain by itself, you don't see any cases where there's a chashash that this thing is made with stam yayin. There's any cases that thing should be mutar. So that means if I go to pick up a bottle of whiskey, okay, just a generic thing of whiskey. Should I be concerned that maybe the starting material was stam yayin? Is it common? Is it possible? Yeah, it's done. It's within reason that it should be done. So should I just? So does that mean is it mutar? From what simple reading Gemara, we haven't seen a reason to make it mutar.
Is that speaking where you don't know there's wine in it?
We don't know, right? If you know, then of course there's nothing to do. Okay, there's some of the things that it says
it's not the norm to put wine in the whiskeys.
Okay, well.
I could be wrong, but
okay. So the question is, what does it take? And we're going to see more as we go on. What does it take to be considered that it's normal? Okay, that's what we're going to come to. What makes it considered normal? What'd you say?
It ain't me.
No, okay. So now we're going to a completely different Gemara. Okay, I'm going to hold this Gemara on the side about the pickles for a second. Go to page 3. A completely different Gemara. The Mishnah. Okay, completely different Gemara. Ir shekafshur karkum, page 3. The Mishnah, right in the middle of the page. The Mishnah is right in the middle of the page. Ir shekafshur karkum. There's a city that was taken over, that the army came and took over the city. So what's it in? Kol ha-kahanu shenim to b'sochem psuas. All the ladies married to Kohanim who are found in that city become puzzled, because we're there because they're shvuyas. There's a mission about a shvuya. We assume that they were ma'anas to shvuya, and she becomes us to her husband. So yesh lehem Aiden, okay. That's what the mission says. The mission says they become us. Zok the Gemara. I thought this was underlined, and I didn't underline it.
I'll go for you so you can get it out for me.
You now break for station identification.
That's what I'm looking for. Where are you?
10 lines from the bottom.
10 lines to the bottom?
11 lines.
Okay, he's correct. About 10 lines or so from bottom. Amar b'idi ba'oven, Amar b'yitzak barashion. Okay. If there's one place for them to hide, I mean, one place where we can assume they would have been able to hide, and the army wouldn't have been able to catch them, myself, al kahanas kulan. That saves all the kahanas. They all become, all the kahanas are mutter. If there's one place that they can hide, they're all mutter, because we're told that each one of them hid in that spot, and each one of them could say, I'm the one who was able to hide in that spot, and I'm mutter. What's the din if this hiding spot only has room for one lady? Well, there's 20 ladies married to Kahanim in town, and there's only room for one of them. Me, I'm reading Kol Chod V'Chod Hainuha. Can each lady say, I'm the one who hid in that spot, and she's mutter? Or do we say that she can't say that? And as the Gemara is going to explain, that the problem is because how can it be? It couldn't possibly have all been in there. Okay, and the Gemara asks, "My stomach is shvilin," and my stomach is shvilin. Echatam echatar v'holach be'echad mihem v'asa tyrus v'chaver v'holach b'sheni v'asa tyrus v'huda aimer initial zev nafs tyrus shteim ka'achas tmeis. So the Gemara says like this. So skip a few lines. So Amar Rav Item Rav Yochanan Bevas Achas Divya Kol Tmein Bezeh Achazeh Divya Kol Tahirin Oinechaku El Bavol Ishal Alav Al Chaverin. Okay. So the Gemara says this: if all the ladies come to ask whether they should be mutter or should be usher, the din is that they're all usher because Bezin can't pass into all mutter. There's only room for one lady to hide. Half the 20 ladies have been in there. If they come separately, then they're able to. If they come separately, then we could be matter them one at a time, because each one we could be told that she went there. Okay? So now turn to the next page. Okay. So we had a Gemara here that said, in this case of a shvuya, if a lady comes by herself and there's one way to make it mutter, she could be told that each lady could say, I'm mutter because I'm the one who, or we could say maybe you're the one who hid over there. Okay. We're gonna never make it time-wise. I'm gonna go a little fast. Okay, the document says like this. The document says, what is it? The document says, you're right. That's warming me up. Okay, the document says like this. The Isser V'Heta says that Gemara about shvuyas is not only talking about shvuyas. The Gemara about shvuyas is telling us that any Isser drop, any time there's an Isser, or maybe only an Isser drop on them, anytime there's an Isser drop on them to be Kosher for, and there's even one way to think that it's mutter, you're allowed to be told. If it's even possible that there's one way, the lady can hit in one spot, she's mutter, then the din is you could be toilet and everything is mutter. What?
The lady has best in the Kashrus. And you only mafkiach of Kashrus and pech suffix.
Okay, good. Okay, so, let me first say what the Isser V'Heta says. The Isser V'Heta says you can always be told about all the Rabbanim. So you ask, which is along the lines of what the document is. He says, what are you talking about? It's a special kula for shvuyas. The lots of kulas. They start with a cheskas tire, if you want to say it like that. Shvuyas have lots of kulas. He says, who says?
Special by shvuyas?
Because there are many kulas about shvuyas. Because there's no reason to be choshesh. It's just a chashash that maybe someone was monitored. We have no basis for that.
She's the Zayna. I mean, we're talking about the right.
Yeah, but we have no basis for it. It's the Isser of a shvuya is only drabanan. We have no reason to think that she's usher. Let her decide for herself whether she's mutter or usher. Why would we say that she becomes usher because maybe something happened? We have no reason for that. There's no basis for that. So he says, the Pasha said it should be a special kula for shvuyas. But the Isvet, and he has other Kashrus also. So he says, he also says, the other question, which is right against us, which is, the Gemara by us about the pickled foods sure sounded like it wasn't saying like this. What does the Gemara say? If it's normal to use the pickled, if it's normal to use stam yain in making the food, then it's usher. It's not usher b'hano, but it's usher b'achila. Well, aren't the people there who don't use stam yain? Isn't there such a thing? So this is going to have to say that we don't know that there's somebody who uses the kula. Okay, so the way that, I'm going to skip.
Okay.
The Ramos paskins, even after all his kashrus, he paskins like the Isra Heter. It says by all Yisrun Rabbanan. In this din, on the din of Pushin, by all Yisrun Rabbanan he paskins. If you have a possibility, I'll say how the shach is. If you know that there's somebody who makes it beheter, or if it's a big industry and there's lots of people, and you know there's plenty of people, basically, there must be somebody out there who's making it beheter, you're allowed to be told that your guy is the one who made it beheter. You pick up your bottle of schnapps. Are there people who make schnapps without stam yain into it? Of course there are. So since it's only Issur Rabbanan, so you're allowed to be told that you have the one who didn't make it with the Issur Rabbanan.
Unless you bring all the bottles in one shot.
So wait, wait, no, wait. Wait, so that's exactly what I'm saying right there. Thank you. We're going right there. So according to this, the person can be told completely that he was using the heter. So I'm not the one who thought of this kula. Ramosha brings this. Ramosha's famous shuvah, which is printed later on, to say that you shouldn't be worried about Isser, that stam yain being mixed in. So Ramosha says. He says in the less famous part of his tshuva, he says, well, the Ramah says that it's mutter. The Ramah says you could be Taylor. He says we're only talking about Issur Rabbanan. So if you go back to this chart, the scarier chart, the Issur that we're talking about, the chart that's on the second page, the issue that we're thinking about here is stam yain. That's an Issur Rabbanan. The other issue that we're talking about is that potentially the other trait of raw material that it could come from is from milk. Okay, the milk, in this case, is only Issur Rabbanan. Okay? If we can talk about it. The milk that we're talking about is only milk and Rabbanan. Lactose is only milk and Rabbanan. Okay? That's for a separate shus. Okay? Lactose is only Rabbanan.
Right.
So Ramosha doesn't talk about lactose, but Ramosha brings this Ramah that says that you can always be makel for an Issur Rabbanan. You could be told that it came from the heter. It came from the person who didn't make an Issur Rabbanan. So in case the chashash here is the raw material chashash is stam yain.
Why is lactose Issur Rabbanan?
Afterwards, we'll talk about it afterwards. Okay, just believe me for now. The lactose is only. What? To eat milk and meat together? If you consider milk, if you consider okay, yes, you're right.
They make scotch steaks sometimes.
Okay.
They do.
Okay. The lactose, when we talk about it, lactose is only milk and Rabbanan. And the other issue that potentially the green sakim, all the other potential things that can go wrong with it are all Rabbanan. And therefore, except if you think the animals might be treifus, okay. But everything else is an Issur Rabbanan. And everything else is an Issur Rabbanan. So Ramesh says, so you could be total, and everybody pick up. You could think it's mutter.
You know where this children?
Yeah, it's printed in there. It's printed in there. Don't worry about it. We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay.
Just eliminated 3/4 of fashion.
I told you. So for the people who came,
don't talk.
For the people who came late, whiskey is unique. That it's not unique. It's one of the few foods that doesn't have hashkach on it, and we're judging it based on what the real din is. What would be the din? What would the mechaber have said 200 years ago? Could you eat this food or could you not eat this food? Not whether we live in a very different world where the food has hashkacha and we're used to it and it's proper. What do you say?
I'll go for kasher. Why didn't you hashkacha for? For the rice.
Why does food need? So the Ramah says, I didn't make it. The Ramah says you're allowed to go out and buy pickles in the street because you can assume you could be told that they didn't use that. Right. So a lot of what you do then is for certain foods you need hashkach on, and a lot of things we do are lechatchilas that are not.
Is that where kosher dill pickles comes from?
Even if it is hashkach, so you tell me that din. Let's say in a candy industry, certain candy. I don't know, 90% of the candies are traced, so they're made a certain way, but 10% are made differently in their kosher. 9% have certain ingredients, right? In terms of,
and it's
it's okay, you can eat any candy because, and right, let's do it. Why don't you can eat anything because it's...
So you're looking at me like I stole off the mood. I would maybe be apprehensive to tell you if not the Ramosha says it, but the Ramah says that it's mutter. He said you can go out and buy pickles. Do you think you could buy pickles without hashgacha? You say, are you crazy? You know, they could use wine vinegar. That's exactly the case I was talking about. He says, you could buy pickles, or pickled food. He doesn't say pickles. Okay, fine. Now,
facilities don't operate this way.
now, wait a second. Now, the question's like this. Moshe's question's like this. The correct question, which is, that's true if you're a private citizen asking, I pick up a bottle and say, can I drink this? That's bowl l'shul b'va. I picked up, I want this bottle, I want to know if you could eat it. But now it comes to the hashgachas. We, or everybody else, prints a list that says, the following things are all mutter.
I recommend.
However you say it. All these things are mutter. We make a list.
Not recommended.
We say, we'll say, let's say the list says,
I like that. Not.
all
Rabbi Fisher, please don't talk.
all Tennessee whiskey, we'll say, let's say, for example, is all mutter. Now, aren't we bowl l'shul b'vatachas? We just mastered 50 things all at once. Now, even if we could be told that there are specific, if I pick up a specific bottle, I could say, this one I could say is mutter. How can I be master them all? How can I write a list? All of this and all this. I can say all vodka is mutter because the raw material is not stam yayin, except for the few that I know, the shiraz, and the few ones that I know that are not. Can I say they're all mutter? How can I say they're all mutter? Isn't there some people who make vodka out of, course, there's definitely people who make vodka out of stam yayin, out of milk. So, how can I say they're all mutter? Aren't I being bold with v'vatachas? So for that, turn to page 6. Okay, this is Rabbi Shechter's answer to the question. Okay, from a Ramban. The Gemara says like this: if the ladies came,
Whose question was that, by the way?
whose question was this?
No.
This was my question for Rabbi Shechter. Okay, so Rabbi Moshe not talking about. We're talking about a private person. Is he allowed to eat the food? Okay, so, but now is that translated to a hashgacha being allowed to say this much? So Rabbi Shechter said like this: the Gemara said, you had the ladies, and the din is that they're allowed to be tova. They're allowed, if yesham machvua, they can be tova. First, the Gemara, what happens if there's only room in the machvua for one person? And then the Gemara talks about whether one person is not. So Frek the Ramban, he says, wait a second. When we said there was a machvua, he says, does that mean that hiding place had room for everybody? Before we said if there's only room for one person, what was before that case? What was the case that the Gemara said? For sure you could be matir, and the Gemara, it's not even happening. The Gemara said in that case, even b'vatachas you could be matir. Was that a case where there was room in this hiding place for everybody? So why did the Gemara say that? Why did the Gemara have to say the case? The shayla is, what happens if there's only room for one? Why don't we just say, what happens if there's not room for everybody? Why do we say, what happens if there's only room for one person? What happens if there's room for less than all the amount of people in town? It's mashma from the Gemara. That the heter, even for everybody, is even in cases where there's not room for everybody. Yeah. The only case that we're answering is a case where there's only room for one person. If there's room for one person, then Bezdin can't stand up and say you're all mutter. It looks not a joke. How can it all be mutter? There's 25 ladies in town. There's only room for one. You're all hidden there. You're all hidden there. But if there's room, if there's room for 5 people, if there's room for 5 ladies, he needs to do 20 ladies in town. It doesn't look.
At the very least, one lady would say, they have to say no about it.
What'd you say?
At the very least,
Well, you can't.
they have to say one lady.
You can't.
No. They would say everyone's mutter.
You can't say everybody.
No, everybody. They would be master everybody. Even if there's only room for 5
You can't say everybody.
If what? If there's only room for one person. Right. But if there's room for 5 people, we could be master everybody, even though there's many more than 5 people. Because that doesn't look so silly to be master everybody. That's what Rambam says. He's medayek from the Gemara.
So what's the shir?
So I don't know what the shir is. But for what we need to know is, in us, can we say that all of a whole class of whiskey are mutter? A whole class, even though we know that there are some out there who are doing it now, but our case is not a case where there's only room for one person. It's not just that there's only one guy out there, and I'm being told. That's what you say. The Ramah is saying, I can tell if I even know one guy is Mako, I don't know who. I know there's one guy who doesn't use stam yayin, I can eat everyone. Here, there's lots of people who don't use it. It's not just one person. So then I can be matter everybody, even though I have no way of knowing which is the person I'm being. I might be giving you an issue that you're allowed to be toilet, even for everybody all at once. Okay, that was Rabbi Shechter's answer to the question, which is very.
Sure.
I mean, yeah. Good.
You answer your question. Let's pick one brand. I'm not going to master that one.
You're saying to get away from the problem of bowl l'shul v'vatachas.
Yeah.
Okay, why should we pick on somebody?
We'll find out one.
No. There are ones that say specifically that they have stam yayin. Those obviously we can't be matter.
So okay, that's just one I'm out there.
No. Because between everybody else, are there ones out there who aren't telling us using stam yayin who really are? Yeah, there are. Are there people making vodka from stam yayin that are not telling us?
Of course not for sure. Maybe they're not.
We don't know it for sure.
Maybe they'll lose it totally.
But they don't, because they'll put it in.
Okay.
What time are you speaking?
Tonight? 3:45.
Shall I wake you up?
You will come, Taka, and to be Chazik.
Good. That's rile them up, yes.
Yes.
Yes, keep them alive. We're going to force at 3:45 from the entertainment. You know, yes. Okay, so now things like this. Rav Moshe and his tshuva, which we'll get to more in a second. The main part of Rav Moshe's tshuva is about something else, which is our next topic. But Rav Moshe starts with the tshuva saying like this. Rav Moshe says, you should know that there's lots of shilos about drinking whiskey. I don't drink schnapps because of these chashashos that there are, unless someone comes to me, so you are right, I think it doesn't look nice, it looks like I'm showing off, so I'll drink it.
My show that even if there is a wine for sure it's mutter.
I'm not upset yet. But Moshe says, wait, I'm coming to that second. But the beginning of the yes. What? Yeah, the beginning of the tshuva starts like this. If there are lots of shilos and therefore I don't eat it, but if someone comes to me, I will, because I hope minute dinner it's really mutter. So Rav Moshe says, but lechatchila, I won't eat it. I won't take it lechatchila. So now, in discussing the main part of the tshuva, the more famous part of the tshuva about the Bittul B'Shisha, which we're coming to next, there Rav Moshe explains why each one of his stadim lahakol has a reason to be machmir. For each one of his stadim lahakol, he says, but there are others who are machmir. So we understand good and well why he would choose to not eat the food lechatchila. Why only he said if someone asks him to do it, lechatchila wouldn't. But to this point, that we should be allowed to be told that there's no issa d'rabbanan, he doesn't say why. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't explain any tzad b'hachmir. He brings the Ramah says that it's mutter because we're told that you could be makel about isurim d'rabbanan. So l'chayra, this heter is such a big heter. So let's get others start them. There are other reasons to be machmir about Bittul B'Shisha. This should matter everything. So why is Moshe saying that? Why is Moshe saying that he would eat the stuff l'chatchila? The thing about Bittul B'Shisha, he has all the tzad l'hachmir. But what about this? There's no tzad l'hachmir over here. What's the tzad? Okay, so the tzad l'hachmir, which we're not going to get into, is that even though I told you that the Ramah says this from the Issa v'Heter, there's a pile of others who disagree with it. Okay, the Mechaber himself who doesn't bring it. There's a Raj who disagrees with it. There's lots of people who disagree with this thing to say that the din of shvuya applies to all cases of Yisur D'Rabbanan. Most assume that it's just a case by shvuyas, a special rule by shvuya. Most people do not hold like the Ramah. So the Ramah says it's mutter. So Ramah says it's mutter. Ramah doesn't explain why does it have to be, why he's choosing to be machmir. He's choosing machmir, I guess, because of the way you feel. Like, what are you crazy? We're going to just be naked, get rid of all Yisur D'Rabbanan?
So certainly you'll feel like it goes against the grain of just general stock that we usually do. Right, 90% of the problem, 10% don't. It's D'Rabbanan, so fine. So Moshe, maybe that's why he doesn't bother to explain why for this he chooses to be machmir by himself. I mean, he ultimately did that it's mutter, but it's just a point. There's quite a whole bunch of rayas of people who are not like the Ramah does. The Ramah himself in the Daki Moshe said he's surprised at what the Issa v'Heter says. I'm saying the Ramah himself said that. If you look in the Daki Moshe, so in that case he's mekel is a chiddush that he's being mekel, and that's presumably why Moshe would hold. That it's mutter min adin, but not a bal nefesh. What he calls it, a bal nefesh shouldn't eat. Okay.
Like milk.
Yeah, I guess it's somewhat different. Okay. Okay. Now the second issue. Okay, the first issue we talked about was should we be choshesh that the raw material itself in the wine that the schnapps is made out of has stam yain or milk. That's what the shaila is. The second shaila is down on box number 14 after the whiskey is already in a more traditional whiskey, not like a vodka, a more traditional whiskey. Once the whiskey is all ready, it ages. It sits in barrels for years and years and years, which helps develop the flavor of the whiskey. Okay.
I'm sorry, but I don't even see over here in Dr. Moshe where he says it's mutter.
Are you on?
This one.
Are you on both pages, Dr. Moshe? He brings the Issa v'Heter on the first page, and then he keeps.
Then he says,
and then he adds lots of
nearly the Imi Shkoyach Marajan, but we're in
Right, but the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch brings Issa v'Heter in his maker. The Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch, which is on page 7, the Ramah brings it and he says, and he's maker. Okay? So the Ramah is maker.
So the Ramah argues on himself.
No, he's questioning what this Issa says, but in the end, I guess it's a Shalos of Ramah, so he's accepting what this Issa says. Okay, you see, in the Ramah, the Ramah himself is maker. Okay, so now the Shaila of the first one. So now we're talking about now whether there should be blias coming out of the in this aging.
Can I just stop you 1 second?
Sure.
You say that it's technically possible that every single type of this whiskey, vodka, gin, could have grape in it or milk in it. every single last one of them technically is possible.
You want to ask me, is it theoretically possible or is it actually possible?
Theoretically.
In theory, you can make vodka out of any sugar source. You have to, at box 5, you have to have sugar.
No, you could.
What?
You can make vodka out of soya.
But that I'm not sure about.
The Russian peasants.
Okay, in box number 5, when you when you get to box number 5, and you have sugar. You get box number 5, you have sugar. Okay?
Right.
How you got to that sugar is of no significance. To make whiskey is of no significance. It only makes a difference because you want to have a certain taste to it. So other elements of the taste come through if you start with barley or corn. But if you're going the route of making vodka, you're going to get rid of all that taste. It's called grain neutral because it makes no difference what the grain started with. Mm-hmm. You're going to, by concentrating it to 95%, you get rid of all that taste. So your starting material plays no role in the finished product. Mm-hmm. Vodka made out of potatoes and vodka made out of corn taste the same thing. They have whichever starting material you started with doesn't make a difference to the final product. As opposed to, if you make whiskey, regular whiskey, out of corn and out of barley, it tastes different. Because those taste components carry through. If you're going the route down of making like vodka and gin, once you go to 95%, right, you wipe out everything. That's what's called grain neutral. It makes no difference what it came from. It's of no significance. If you go that route, you could have just as well started with milk. If you live in Australia, you make it out of milk. In New Zealand, because they have lots of milk, they'll make the lactose into alcohol, which could be used as vodka. That's what it is. It doesn't make a difference what it started from. But so in theory, you could make all vodka could be made out of trace raw materials. But in Lamaisa, it's not what it is. It's cheaper to make things out of corn and wheat and potatoes than it is to make it out of grapes. But there are plenty of people who do make it. There's a group of people who make it out of grapes, or when the market is right, blah 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 blah, they'll make it out of grapes. But most days of the week, people are going to make it out of grains. That's the normal way to make it. It's cheaper. That's
In Europe, we call it something.
Two things. Does it taste different what you make it out of?
The vodka? No, it does not.
It doesn't? And could you also give it to a lab and they could tell you what it's made out of?
I don't believe so. Because once you get to box number 5, okay, which is when you get just a mix of sugars, right. At that point there is carryover from the food. The lab still could tell. Once you concentrate to 95%, it's called grain neutral spirits because it's of no difference what the grain is. Everything's been boiled out of it. It's just pure alcohol. So
95% the highest?
Yes, it's be'erach the highest. You can get to like 95%. After that, you can't. It's almost impossible to purify more than that.
So that's because they call that 9 again? Is 95%?
That I don't know. I can't.
Okay.
Comment on that.
96%.
Okay.
Well, maybe not.
I can't comment on that. Okay. So now we're trying to do about aging. This is probably the most famous shiloh about wine, about whiskey, and in particular, the shiloh is particularly applied to Scotch because what you do is you age the whiskey in a barrel, and it sits there for years and years and years, and that improves the taste of the whiskey. In most whiskeys, most places in the world, they do it in any old barrel. In fact, like in bourbon, you have to use new barrels, and the people who make Scotch have this thing that there's a culture of doing it in sherry casks. Sherry is a kind of a wine, so there's a culture of doing it like that, and therefore there's more of a shiloh for those kind of things. Okay, so shiloh is should we be kosher that the Scotch was made in those sherry casks. Now, if we don't know, then one of the things we have to consider is the first thing we were talking about. The first shiloh, which is maybe I don't have to be kosher for it. That's what Moshe also said. That maybe I don't have to be kosher for it. That's one thing. But in many cases, it's very clear. They tell you that they're using it. Okay, it's very obvious that they're using it. That they're proud of it, and they tell you straight out that they're using it. So we can't be making and say, "Oh, we'll be told that they don't use it," because they do use it. We know that they use it. So the shiloh is there a way to be makel even if they use it? Okay. Okay. So Ramosha says, Ramosha's kula, in few words, is that he says the din is that stam yain is bought the bashisha into certain things, and therefore he thinks that Ramosha's case is not talking about barrels. Okay, it's a misconception. He's talking about the amount of pouring the wine right in. But the shiloh in most situations applies. The issues apply almost exactly the same to blias. So he says it's bought the bashisha. Since it's bought the bashisha 6 times, so therefore, in his case, they were using the 2.5%. We'll see why in a second. So they were using it 2.5%. It's bought the bashisha, and so the
the finished product should be mutter, even though we know that it has stam yain in it. Even if we know, we can't use the first kula.
Yes.
So the first thing before we
Yes.
get into the shiloh of it is if you could turn to page. So here's the Moshe Tshuva over here. We have to turn to page. Oh, okay. You know what? I'm sorry.
What's the fact there's no Kosher?
Is covered by stam yain? What do you mean there's no covered by stam yain?
If you put water into wine barrel, right? Listen.
Yes.
So why is it different?
So why is
In the case of Ramesh, in the case of the shower casket.
so your question is cask, not a casket. That's not good. So your question is the Gemara says that the bli of stam yain is lafkam into other liquids. So just like in Cain, you should be able to be makel and say that it should be put into wine also.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that cool in this case. When the person, right, two things. First of all, because the person is putting it in where he wants it to give a good taste. That's he's doing because he thinks it does give a good taste. And I'll add a wrinkle to that is that the idea of schnapps, okay, whiskey, the technology to make whiskey was not around times of the Gemara. So it's not, the Gemara says that for all beverages, okay, we'll see more in a second what the Gemara is talking about, whether it should apply to whiskey also, which is also an alcoholic beverage, is not a thing that existed. For example, Blias of stam yain and not mutter into stam yain. If you put wine into a wine barrel, right. So a whiskey into wine, which is if it had existed in the Gemara, we would just say that it's lafkam, but it really didn't exist in that time, and the people dafka wanted there. So it's hard to say that it's lafkam into this thing. But that's good. Okay, we're switching. Turn to page 13. I missed page 12. Turn to page 13. Yes.
How long do you have time for tonight? Just for yourself.
That's why we're doing this now. It's practice. I'm not.
We're going to fix it.
Right. That's right.
We've been hired for
The shadow is like this.
No food?
The blia of we're saying that Ramesh is talking about a case where he knew that there was 2.5% wine going into the water, into the schnapps. But we're not talking about that case. We're talking about a blia from a cask going into the schnapps. So do we have a right to say that those blias are also about the beshisha? Okay, so normally you say, that's an obvious question. There's always 6 times in a container versus what the walls of the container are. That you just like, well, of course, it's obvious that it should be like that. Okay, in fact, it's not true. Really? In fact, it's not true because the casks that they use to store schnapps are a be'erach, an inch thick. Okay, they're not very large at all. They're like 50-gallon drums. They're like an inch thick, the walls. And if you look at the numbers here in the math on page 13, you'll see that there's only about 4 times as much liquid as there is walls. Are you serious? Yeah, there's only about
so small.
The barrels have walls that are an inch thick. So what? But the barrels, 8 to 10 inches.
The whole 50 gallons.
Right. So if you look at the math, if you don't, not only I can't vouch for the math.
So you're saying sherry casks. What is sherry?
Sherry is a kind of wine.
It's just pure wine.
It's a kind of wine. The custom is not important. It's a
So
kind
it
of
is
wine.
important because if it's not 100%.
Oh no, it's pure wine. Yes,
It's
yes,
pure
it is
wine.
pure wine. Yes.
Okay.
So if you look at the math over here, done together with the head of the Department of Physics in some college.
You need a mathematician for this?
Yes, you need a mathematician because the barrels are not straight. The barrels have a bulge in them. So to figure out the bit in the bulge was beyond my mathematical capabilities. So my neighbor's father-in-law is this person. He's a physicist. He's a physicist, but he like lives in this math. He gave this a similar assignment, a different child we had, to his graduate students as like a paper to figure out the answer to a different child we had. A different child like Kashrus. Okay, so he used to like to do these things. So he did big parts of the math of this. Okay, and it came out there's only about 4 times as much liquid as there is walls of the thing. Okay, so Rav Moshe is talking about you put the N in, and we're talking about kiss because l'chayr should be 2 different childs. Okay, so the reason why this is a mistake, the reason why what I'm saying to you is a mistake is because there's another din, which is the Ramah says that if you
I'm just incredulous. I just can't believe there's only 4 times to the barrel.
Okay.
So
you can
I'm sorry to.
Okay, so you're welcome to look at your leisure.
I got it.
You have a whole night. Okay.
And the barrels are standard?
This is a barrel size. We got it from a barrel manufacturer and whiskey manufacturers, and using barrels a certain size. So I'm not saying it's always going to be 4.24 times. You know, the next time might be 4.5 or 3.5 or 5. Right. But to say that it was 6 was not. It didn't think within striking range of being 6. So the reason why that's a mistake is because the shiloh is a mistake. Is because the Ramah says that the way you kasher
blia of kavush of stam yain is through milu the and he has some other ways you can kasher. And there's another way to kasher. You can scrape off a kadei klipa's worth of the kli. If you scrape off a kadei klipa's worth of the kli, then you could use it for kosher also. And the Ramos in the Mechaber says someplace else more clearly that the reason for that is because Le'inyan blia is a stam yain. This is a special kul by stam yain. We say that the blia only goes in kadei klipa. Even though usually we say kavashus kumavoshul goes in kadei kuloi, the blia goes all the way through the whole thickness of the kli. It's a special kula by stam yain that we assume the blia only goes in kadei klipa. Therefore, if you have a kli that had a blia of stam yain, you could kasher just by scraping off a kadei klipa, because we don't assume there's any blia beyond it. And
you look at the klipa,
so the klipa connected to the product is going to be part of the
How do you know? I don't know.
Because the only reason why
I don't know.
Because the only reason why it's not because it's instinct. Okay.
Do we know what measurement the klipa is?
I don't know, but it's going to get us past 6 times. Okay, if it's at 4 1/4 and our 6 an inch thick, I don't care how big the klipa is. We're going to make it to 6. Okay, I'm not worried. That doesn't bother. Okay, so we overcame a hurdle. Okay, just to say that it's potentially about the b'shisha. So Ramosha says we got past that. Okay, so now we can now say that what Ramosha says about putting the end of stam yain is similar to our style of a blia of stam yain. Okay, Ramosha has. I'm not going to have time to go through all the 6 reasons. Ramosha has 6 reasons to think maybe it shouldn't be b'al b'shisha. Okay, I'll quickly read you off, and then there's 1 and 2 that I want to focus on. Some say that stam yain is not b'al b'shisha. It's only b'al b'shisha. Okay, there are those who say like that. Ramosha says, yeah, I mean, the Mechaber and the Ramah are makel, but there are those who say like that. So Baal Nefesh maybe should machmir for that shita.
Who says that?
Who says to be machmir? I don't remember who says to be machmir. The Mechaber and the Ramah says to be makel. Okay. Then some say there's a machlokes now with Taz and a Shach as to whether stam yain is b'al b'shisha into water or into all liquids. Okay. So Ramosha says the din is lahokol, it's into all liquids, but there's a Taz to be machmir and say it's only into water, and it wouldn't be b'al b'shisha into this. Then there's a sheet of a rajbo, which is its own question. Is maybe if you put something on purpose, it can't be bottled. So in that case, that Ramosh is the way they put it on purpose. Maybe it can't be bottled. But the 2 that I want, and then the last is, which is the overriding reason.
Does it make a difference if it's a Jew or a guy who puts it in?
If it's put on purpose? Yeah. No. It's a rajbo hold that when bittul means that it's so unimportant it can be bottled. But if I wanted it in the food, how can you say that it's bottled? I wanted it. Okay, that's like the inherent opposite of bittul. But then, in Ramosh, the overriding reason, which is for sure true, there's no one to argue, which is that it's behemish hara b'chacham. If it takes us an hour to get through half the shilos of it, then it's behemish hara b'chacham, and it's Baal Nefesh should not eat it. That's an overriding reason that no one can argue with. And we're only touching on 3 of the shilos. There are other smaller shilos. The 2 that I wanted to talk about are like this.
Is that a shear?
What?
Is that a real shear?
What is a real shear? If it takes a half an hour, then it's a ham shear. No.
Depends what you have.
Okay.
That's how I first
Okay. So now like this. Ramosha says, the Mata Yonason says that if you put in something, if you put it in to improve the beverage, you think that's going to make your food better, then everyone holds it's not b'al b'shisha. B'al b'shisha is only when it's just in there, and you say, yeah, shisha, once it's past shisha, it doesn't help. But if it is there to help your thing, then it's not b'al b'shisha.
Are you only talking about b'al b'shisha?
Yes, only b'al b'shisha.
Not b'al b'shisha?
Correct.
Nothing to do with
it. Right, because shisha means after shisha there's no time. It couldn't be helping the food. But here it gives time. At shisha it still gives time. But if it's did on purpose to improve it, then it's nothing.
Because why else would they add ingredients?
No, help could be other things like then you shut up my mint, but it could be help to be balanced pH or some other reason. Okay. Now. So Ramosha says, this sheet of the Mata Yonason, okay, he says there is no makar to such a shita. Okay? Ramosha says there is no, I don't remember the words, it's probably underlined in the papers by Ramosha. He says there's no makar to such a shita. But he says, listen, maybe the Mata Yonason was a big guy. He says, maybe if he would be around, he'd be able to prove it to us. So he says that's a reason why he says the Baal Nefesh should be mad. Okay, now the reason why I mentioned it's the 4th reason, so you should be able to find here reviews. The reason is on page 11. Okay? The reason why I mention it is because like this idea that Ramosha thing, this 4th reason to say there's no bit of b'shisha when it's there to improve the beverage, is something that many people have taken as the way they hold. They take the shita very much for real, and they say like this. They say, once you hear this, it'll sound familiar to you. Yankee, you should listen. They say like this. They say, if
they put in the sherry and they're proud of it and they think it gives good taste. Like there's one shita in Scotch makers, which is you're supposed to put lots of sherry and it gives a great taste to the food, to the Scotch. Then we're going to answer it. But if they put in sherry just to offset the bad taste in the barrels and things, they put a little bit, they don't make a big to do about it, which is the main shita in Scotch makers. They hold that the sherry is not supposed to give a taste into the Scotch. It's just supposed to get rid of tannins and who knows what else. Then if you hold it like that, then we're going to be maker. Now where did that come from? Where did such a shita come from? So it sure sounds like it's this Mati Yonason, that if the guys put it in on purpose because they want, I don't mean on purpose, they gave it to give taste to add to the food, then it's also. And if they put it in just to make it, to offset some kind of a problem, then it's also. And that's the thing that Ramosha, then it's mutter. This is the thing that Ramosha says, there's no basis to such a shita. So I'm only going to explain to you why I think people say it. And I don't think it's exactly what the Mati Yonason says. Okay? What I'm saying is, this thing that I've heard from many people who tell you what they think about the Kashrus of whiskeys will tell you about Scotch. They'll tell you if they tell you that they put it in, and they put lots of it, and they put it in different taste, and they're all proud of it, and you can taste it when you drink the beverage, then it's awesome. But if they put it in and just a little bit, just to offset some taste, then it's mutter. Okay. So now there's two reasons to say why, for the basis for those people. One is maybe they're just saying because it looks bad. How could the rabbi get up and say you're allowed to drink this thing when the guy is telling you straight out to your face, I put in stam yayin because I think it makes my thing taste good? It just looks bad. How could it's like a Muslim to me that the rabbi should get up and say on his stationery, you can drink this thing, when the person who makes the food tells you, I'm telling you that I put stam yayin into it. So maybe it's mutter. Maybe they're not saying Kashrus, and then it's mutter. But what kind of a problem does it have to say we can't live without this food? We have to say that it's mutter even when the guy says I put trace into my food. So it looks bad. You can't say such a psak that it's mutter. There's plenty of other things to drink. I'm not a drinker, but there's plenty of other things to drink. It just looks bad. That's one. No. There's another side to say why those people are hashmir, which is like this. The first reason Moshe has to say why it shouldn't be bought to B'shisha is because he says maybe, and he thinks this is wrong, but he says maybe when it's mutter b'achila, it's only mutter b'shisha. If it's bought to B'shisha, it's mutter b'achila. But maybe you're still getting hanof from the thing, or if you're getting hanof from the thing, then it should be also because stam yayin is also b'hanof. Stam yayin, according to many days, even nowadays, is also b'hanof. So he says, so maybe it's also, maybe bit of B'shisha only helps to make it mutter b'achila, but maybe that doesn't help to make it mutter b'hana. In cases where it gives hana, it shouldn't be mutter b'hana. So now Ramosha says he thinks the din is that it really is mutter b'hana, even though Ramos is not like that and the Shach is not like that, but that's what Ramosha said. But now, so Ken Zayin, that in a case where the guy puts it in, and he tells you, I think my beverage is going to taste even better because I put in so much sherry into it, then what did the guy do? Then we're having hana from it. He thinks that his product is made better because of that. The other guys are mamish what the Gemara says. We had the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Lavurei Zuama. If they're putting it in, the Gemara said itself that was a reason to say it's not a hana. The very first Gemara we saw was the Gemara said if they Chizkiah holds that if in case of the fish oil, it's mutter b'hana because why is the fish oil mutter b'hana? Because they put it in Lavurei Zuama, so it's not considered getting hana from it. So that's mamish what goes on here. The guys who put it in just to offset the taste. There's no hana from this thing. They're putting it in just to offset a taste, so I'm not getting hana from it. So then it's just a question of isur yachila and there's just a b'shisha. If you're the kind of guys who put it in because you say it's going to make the greatest product and you're going to taste it and you're going to make a great product, the ones who are more proud of it, so to speak, that's shita in Scotch makers. Those guys, then the taka is, it's not like Lavurei Zuama, then it's to give tam, like the Gemara said, and then it should be also, even also b'hana, in which case we then run to the first thing where Moshe says that bittul b'shisha might only work for the Isra Achila, not for the Isra Hana.
Is that hana?
Is what?
Isra Achila is automatically hana?
Yes, but Moshe is saying is that something could be mutter b'achila, meaning the wine is bittul b'shisha. You're not considered to be eating wine, but you're getting hana from the wine. You're getting hana from having this wine, even though you're not getting an Isra Achila for now,
by saying it's mutter b'achila, you're saying it's mutter b'hana.
That is what Ramosha says. Ramosha says he really thinks like you say, which is that once the food is bought to B'shisha, he says it's not wine.
It's not there anymore.
It's not wine, so how can he say it hasn't come from?
It's not there anymore.
Right, so Ramosha, I'm saying, really holds that stam yayin. Ramosha says really it's bought to B'shisha and it applies even to Surah Hana. But he says the reason for people to be machmir, for the Bali Nefesh Machmir, one of his reasons is to consider this to be considered an Isra Hana, even though, like you're saying, the simple understanding is that it's not Isra Hana.
Right? I'm just saying is to now explain why some people will say that these kind of kashrus are mutter and these ones are also based on the kavanah of the people putting it in, has some kind of a place to it.
The way you're saying it, you're making it sound like the difference in the industry actually I don't know what to do. Some will just use it to take out the taste,
Yes.
and some will use it to improve the taste. I thought that it's a machlokes of what happens here. And they're both doing the same thing, but some say what happens is giving a time, and some say no, it doesn't do anything.
You're right. Yes, you're right that's how the machlokes, so to speak, started. But what happened is that the guys who believed that it adds to the taste became more into that shita and will start using, let's say, only sherry casks, because they want to make sure there's lots of that taste into it. And they'll even, some of them, we'll see in a second, even add sherry in later. Because once they hold of that shita, so they got really into it, and they put lots of sherry, and they're proud of it.
Lots of sherry, they have to the cask.
No, because it doesn't sit just in one cask. Over its 12 years, it sits in many casks. They'll use only sherry casks. And they'll only use first run sherry casks. We'll see about that in a second. They only use first run sherry casks to make sure they get sherry casks that have that the first time it's been used. So they're very into it, and they'll even tell you, they put it onto the bottle, and you can read it. They make a whole effort into it. The other guys say, no, they're ruining the scotch. The other guys say, they're ruining the taste. If you just made a certain amount to offset. Okay, so I can't creep into everybody's mind, but this is okay. One other thing that we're not going to talk about, which has to do with the first one cask, is there's a thought to say, even if they use sherry cask, the cask might be mutter because of meal of Hebrew. That's its own different child. Okay. We've done so. And I want to get to the third issue, how I'm going to make it to Kashrus. The third issue, which I want to talk about, was the flavors.
Just with the sherry cask, once it's finished in the sherry cask, how long is the period till they actually use it for the next? So, like 12 months?
After they
finish with the sherry.
No, I don't believe so. I shouldn't say. I don't believe so.
Means in the bottling? Till the bottle?
No. The guy in Spain uses it for sherry. He finishes it on June 1st. How quickly does the scotch get into it? Does it sit for 12 months between June 1st? Does he not use it for another year? Or does he
make a difference, no?
Yes, it makes quite a difference. Yes, I know the answer to that. That makes, I think that dries out in 12 months, anything. I don't know. I can't answer. I don't. Okay. The last thing was about the last step on the bottom of the page here, which is 13 through 17 on the bottom of the page here, which is once the product is finished, and this even applies to things that were not aged. Once the thing is finished, are they adding things into it later on that would maybe after the wine, after the beverage, because of there being a milk level time which might be traded. Okay, so I'm going to go through it quickly. I know that. I'm going to go through it. I know that. And I have a dentist appointment.
No, that's neat. It's going to happen. You're not going to get to a quarter of this.
Don't worry. Don't know. You have to work the boat anyway.
Bottom line, they're going to ask at the end. Rabbi Konku, you drink the calendar.
Okay. Okay, so the third issue is about flavors. Okay, which comes in a few different forms. Okay, but before, just to talk quickly about the shiloh, what a flavor is. Flavors have in it things that are avizo timer and that are not avizo timer. Flavors are usually put in an amount.
Can you explain that?
Yes, flavors have in them some components that give taste to the food, and some components that are there just as carriers and all kinds of other kinds of roles that have nothing to do with top. Flavors are usually put in such tiny amounts that everything in there except for the avital time is bas b'shishin. Right. So those are usually not a shiloh. The shiloh is on the parts that are avital time that give taste. Okay, so now there's a bigger question about whether let's say a flavor has 5 components that give tam, and one of them is treif. Should we treat this flavor as kosher or treif? Should we say that it's treif because it has an avital time, or should we say it's kosher because of zev garden? Of the 5 tastes that are in here, 4 of them are kosher, 1 of them is treif. So overall, the bouquet that we call this finished flavor is made of kosher and treif, so zev garden. Okay.
That's really what they call it.
That's a question. That's a question.
They're really called bouquet?
Yes, that's what the flavor is. Yes, I did not make that. It's not because of shul. That's what the flavor is called. Okay. So the assumption that we will work with, okay, which is the top lahachmir, is to say like this: the Gemara says that zev zakar only works when the isser is aimed by kedei l'chametz. The isser can't do the thing by itself. Okay. The way it works when you make a flavor is when you have 5 components. If you were to only have one of those components, it's not like that component would do nothing. You wouldn't taste something. That's not the way it works. The way it works is that they take they take a bite of an orange, and they say, what do I taste when I have an orange?
And the flavor says, I really taste 5 different things when I'm eating an orange, and then I put each one of those 5 things into the flavor, so that when you drink the orange soda, you'll taste that orange taste that I taste when I bit into an actual orange. And they're trying to mimic that. But they say, now the 5 things that they put in have nothing to do with orange. It's not like I'm putting in a little orange and a little more orange and a little more orange and a little more orange until I have all together that orange flavor. No, I put in one thing that tastes like,
colors.
Look at the flavor formula for orange flavor. It does something,
the components that in there.
In colors, and it comes out with them.
Yes. So in this case, if I were to put in just the trace would have enough pound to it. Is there enough strength to give taste? Now, the thing that I'd be drinking, instead of tasting like orange soda, it would taste like, and I don't kid you, it'll taste like cut grass. Okay. Now, nobody wants to drink soda that tastes like freshly cut grass. Okay. But it would give it pound. It has enough it has enough to give pound that. Now, what me and you don't normally realize that when we bite into an orange, one of the things we're tasting is cut grass. Okay, but they say, you really do. That's a green note, and we're going to put that in. And then when you drink your orange soda, you're going to taste this grass at just the right time. It's going to make it taste good. Okay, so that the top of halfway is to say that it's yesh b'kdel hamd. Okay, we could talk about this more later. We're really out of time. but it's negayah for the following. There's 2 different ways, two different ways to flavor a whiskey. There's 2 very different ways to do it. One is I take vodka. Okay, vodka has a very standard and plain taste to it. I take vodka and I add orange flavor to it. I make orange vodka. I make spiced rum. Take a thing that has a reasonably simple taste, and I give a whole different taste to it. Okay, that's number 17. I take a thing and I add a flavor to it. I add something that gives a strong taste. I make something called imitation bourbon. What's imitation bourbon? It means I take rye and I add a flavor to it that makes it taste like bourbon. So it tastes like rye. It tastes like bourbon. I'm making a very noticeable change to the thing. That's what's called a flavor. And that's kind of the case. If one of the things is usher, we would have to say it would not be seven zakrim, and you wouldn't be allowed to drink it. Okay, if you look at the last page on the handout, it's a list of things like that have flavor in it. But then there's another thing called a blender. Okay, a blender is not a flavor. A blender is like this. This is what Ramosha was talking about when he said the 2.5%. The government allows you in many cases to put in. Let me back up. The government charges be'erach 100% tax on schnapps. If you want to put in America, France, in the United States, the American government charges be'erach 100% tax on schnapps. Sales tax, remember? Yeah. Well, whatever they call it. Before they sell. So if they cost them, it costs them $10 to make the bottle, they can't sell for less than $20. Okay, $10 goes right to the government. So in order to get out of those taxes, the government says that only applies if it's a beverage. If you put in a flavor, the alcohol that's in the flavor, that doesn't count. The alcohol in the flavor is not a beverage, that's a flavor. So that alcohol in the flavor, you don't have to pay such high taxes on. Okay? So, does that make sense? So you could make a beverage, if it would be 100% alcohol.
That doesn't make sense.
You make all 20 ounces of schnapps, you have to pay tax on those 20 ounces. If you make 19 ounces of schnapps and 1 ounce of flavor, of what you call flavor, you don't pay tax on that 1 ounce. So what the government lets you do is you put up to 2.5%. That's what Moshe is talking about. 2.5% of flavor. In order to be a flavor, it has to give taste. But the reason why the guy is putting it in is not because he wants to taste. He's putting it in because he's getting free alcohol. Okay. Now that alcohol that he puts in might be trace. That might be grain neutral spirits. That might be trace also. But aside from that, child, leave that on the side. He's putting it in.
Right?
No, that's not why they're putting glycerin. He's putting in the alcohol. We'll get to glycerin afterwards. They put in the alcohol. They put in the alcohol so they can slip by on the taxes. Now, in order to be allowed to put in the alcohol, they have to put in some taste instead also, because they're not allowed to put in alcohol, they're allowed to put in flavor. So the thing that they call it is called a blender, which means is they're putting something in to legally call this alcohol a flavor rather than being called just plain alcohol. Now, let me understand. So they're putting in some alcohol that's flavored. Right, flavored. Well, they're putting in a flavor. Flavors often are carried in alcohol. But in this case, it's not that they're putting in orange flavor, that they're carrying in alcohol, because that's just the way you do it. Their mind is, I'm putting in alcohol, and I never have to put in some flavor.
It's about things like it tastes like nothing. They're not interested in really changing the taste.
Correct. Now, at the beginning, when this first started, they would put in anything that would taste like nothing. They didn't want to affect the taste. Had no reason to affect the taste because it was just a trick, so to speak. The government was like winking at them and letting them do this. Okay, so they would. But with time, it's not true. With time, they did begin putting in flavors. They said, once I'm already doing it, I might as well get something out of this also. But the flavors that they put in, as a rule, are very subtle flavors, and they're there. But the word that uses blenders is because
blends and makes it that overall all of our schnapps taste similar from year to year, or it gives certain similarities to people getting.
The lemon?
No, not lemon. No. If you give lemon flavor, it means I'm taking schnapps and I'm adding lemon flavor to it. I'm making that's positive.
So this doesn't come on the ingredient.
No, it doesn't come with the concept. So the whole, by its nature, the blender that they're putting in is not to add a different taste. It's to add a similar taste to what you have in your schnapps, and to somehow, overall give a little bit stronger, a little weaker taste to it. So that's mamish a case of a zev zagarim, because there, the time that I'm putting in here is along the lines of the time of the food that's in there already. So it's not like I'm putting lemon into vodka. Lemon and vodka have nothing to do with each other. So the lemon that's in there, if it's a treif, is making this food treif. The blender that I'm putting into there, that the guy's putting in, is a blender that's within the range of the taste that we have there. And the overall taste that I taste is 97% because of the schnapps, and 3% because of the flavor that's in here. So it's mamish a case of zevzagar. I'm not saying myself. This is an argument we made that Rabbi Belsky and Rabbi Shefter both accepted. That kind of case, there's mamish a zevzagar. Okay, there's other stuff to be made about the blenders also. So what I'm saying in is like this. If you have a thing that's on the last page, that's mamish a flavor thing. You have an imitation thing. You have a flavored vodka, spiced rum. You have a liqueur that's flavored. There, the flavor gives a pronounced different taste to the thing that's there originally, and that's a regular style of a flavor that seemingly should be offered, and there's no cool of zevzagar. If you have a thing that has just a blender, which is reasonably common in things that are called blended, there's legalities here. They're allowed to have this 2.5% of alcohol. There's good reason to say that stuff is not considered Avidot Taima. That's mamish case of zevzagar, and even on the side that it's in there, and even on the side that it's treif, it would be more to have that kind of stuff.
So what is called blended whiskey? That has nothing to do with that.
Yes, it does, because in almost everything the government is very medactic on how you call your thing. And almost everything that's called blended, okay, that has the word in it, that's allowed to use the word blended, is allowed to have HFCBM, harmless coloring and flavoring and blending materials. The order. So almost every one of them is allowed to have that in it. So when you call something blended bourbon, let's say, then you're allowed to have blended. Really means you could have from more than one batch, but it also allows you to throw in harmless coloring and flavoring material. Whatever it stands for. So then you're allowed to put in a blender. Now, if you were a guy making whiskey, if you're a really high quality person, you might say, I won't put in the blender because it might affect my taste. But if you're even not such a high, even if you are, or even if you're not high quality, you'll say, I get 2.5% for free. I'm going to save 50% on this thing. So why wouldn't I put it in? And it's the 100% tax on the thing. I'll say the 100% tax.
You're just saving 2.5%.
But on that 2.5%, I'll save full tax on that thing. Right. So there's a lot of money to save. There's a lot of money to save on every bottle. I'll be able to knock off, save another 50 cents on a bottle. Mm-hmm. It's a considerable tax that I'm saving on it. So when a guy's allowed to, some people off their pride and off the pride of their product, they won't put it in. But it's reasonably common that a guy would want to do that because it's free money.
What's the difference between Canada and America? There is something different.
Yes, there are. The rules in Canada and the labeling requirements are not nearly as strict as we have here. So the rules to my understanding, the rules of what you can call straight bourbon and straight Tennessee has very more specific rules. And in Canada, things are looser as to what can be called Canadian whiskey. The rules I believe, are less strict as to what has to be in there. Okay.
Rabbi,
okay, I didn't talk about his finishings. Okay, the finishings is in box number 13.
On the bottom?
Okay, the finishing is 13.
Like Friday?
Yes, finishings of number 13 is really very similar to our Moshe Shaila about Bitter B'Shisha.
What is finishing?
Finishing is that when the government, the rules change about how they make bourbon, and markets change all kinds of things, that they stop using sherry casks. People make scotch, stop using sherry casks. So the guys who made the sherry had a problem. It didn't taste as good. The scotch didn't taste as good when they didn't put the sherry in. So they started doing is to smear sherry on the bottle, on the not sherry cask. They would smear sherry onto the outside of it before they put the scotch into it. On the inside of it before they put the scotch in. And it wasn't the essence of a sherry cask. They made sherry.
That wasn't outlawed.
Right? No. What they changed the law in Kentucky and then something changed in Spain. So there were less sherry casks and more non-sherry casks available on the market. So the guys in Scotland didn't have those sherry casks to use. So it wasn't tasting right. So they started smearing sherry onto it. And so first they did it just as to mimic the sherry casks. Then they came up with a ninth level. How many different brands can I have of my schnapps? I make schnapps. So they started making it with special finishings. I mean, now the type of finishing you put onto it became like a flavor. It's a sherry. It's sherry. You're pouring the wine onto it, but the way you do it and how many times or whatever it is became now a marketing tool. Instead of just selling it, I used to sell 12, 15, and 18-year-olds. Now I sell 15 with this finish and this thing 15 with that finish. I can make the different.
Why don't they just put in a little sherry? Enough is over. Just put a little sherry in it. Whatever gets out of the walls of the thing, you know.
I'm not a scotch maker. I'm sorry. So I don't. But that's what the dates for Moshe Shalom at Shisha. Okay.